the heavy fog of Victorian London clung to the narrow alleyways of Whitechapel, masking the shadows where a killer lay in wait on the night of August 7th, 1888. Long before the name Jack the Ripper struck terror into the hearts of the city, a woman named Martha Tabram met a fate so brutal it would haunt the cobblestones of George Yard buildings for eternity. Found in a pool of blood on a cold stone landing, her body bore the marks of a frenzied, inexplicable rage that signaled the beginning of a dark era. This was not just a murder, it was a grim herald of the horrors to come, a mystery that remains unsolved over a century later. Before we delve deeper into the chilling details of this forgotten tragedy, remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of history. One day at a time, Whitechapel in 1888 was a labyrinth of poverty, overcrowding, and desperation, where thousands of people struggled to survive in the abyss of East London. Martha Tabram was one of those many souls, a woman of 39 who had fallen on hard times after a failed marriage and a life of transient labor. On that bank holiday Monday, the streets were filled with revelers, seeking a brief escape from their grim reality. But for Martha, the night would end not in celebration, but in a desperate struggle for life, in a dimly lit tenement stairwell. The evening began normally enough for Martha and her friend, Mary Ann Connolly, known on the streets as Pearly Poll. The two women had spent the night drinking in various pubs, eventually meeting two soldiers, a corporal and a private, near the Frying Pan pub. As the night wore on, the pairs separated for some private business, with Martha leading her companion into the dark recesses of George Yard. It was the last time she would ever be seen alive, vanishing into the gloom with a man whose identity would become the subject of intense investigation. At around 4:50 a.m., a resident named John Saunders Reeves was leaving for work when he made a gruesome discovery on the first-floor landing of George Yard buildings. In the flickering light of the early dawn, he saw the body of a woman lying on her back, her clothing disarrayed, and her body motionless. Initially thinking she was merely a homeless person, sleeping off a drunken night, he soon realized the horrific truth when he saw the dark stains spreading across the floor. Martha Tabram was dead, and the violence inflicted upon her was unlike anything the local authorities had ever seen. When Dr. Timothy Killeen arrived to examine the body, he was shocked by the sheer ferocity of the attack. Martha had been stabbed 39 times, with wounds concentrated on her chest, abdomen, and neck. Most of the injuries appeared to have been made by a small, thin blade, possibly a penknife, but one wound stood out, a deep puncture to the sternum that suggested a much larger, stronger weapon, perhaps a bayonet. This discrepancy led investigators to believe that two different weapons, or perhaps even two different attackers, were involved in the slaughter. The investigation immediately turned toward the military, given Pearly Poll's testimony about the soldiers they had met earlier that night. Hundreds of soldiers from the Tower of London and Wellington Barracks were lined up for identification parades, but the process was fraught with difficulty. Pearly Poll, perhaps out of fear or the effects of alcohol, struggled to provide a definitive identification, and the soldiers' alibis were difficult to disprove. The man in the red coat became a phantom in the investigation, a suspect who slipped through the fingers of the law. For years, historians and ripperologists have debated whether Martha Tabram was the true first victim of the legendary Jack the Ripper. While her murder occurred just weeks before the killing of Mary Ann Nichols, the nature of her wounds, stabbing rather than throat-cutting and evisceration, has led some to exclude her from the canonical five. However, the location, the timing, and the sheer overkill of the attack suggest a killer who was evolving, testing his methods before refining the signature style that would soon terrify the world. Martha's death was a sensation in the local press, bringing a brief spotlight to the appalling conditions of the Whitechapel slums. Yet, as the Ripper's more famous victims began to pile up, her story was largely pushed to the margins of history. She became a footnote in a larger narrative, a possible victim, whose name is often whispered but rarely centered. Her life, once full of the same hopes and struggles as any other, was reduced to a statistic in the annals of Victorian crime. Today, George Yard has been renamed Gunthorpe Street, and the old tenement buildings are gone, replaced by modern structures. But for those who walk these paths at night, the air still feels heavy with the weight of the past. Martha Tabram's murder remains a cold case, a silent witness to the brutality that once thrived in the shadows of the British Empire. She was a mother, a daughter, and a woman who deserved more than a violent end on a lonely staircase. As we look back at the calendar of crime for August 7th, we remember Martha not just as a victim, but as a person whose life was stolen by a monster who never faced justice. Her story serves as a reminder that every name in the history books represents a human being, and every unsolved mystery is a debt we owe to the truth. The echoes of that night, in 1888, still resonate, a chilling prelude to the autumn of terror that was about to unfold. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime. Your engagement helps us keep these stories alive and ensures that the victims of history are never truly forgotten. Join us next time as we turn the page to another dark chapter in the history of the world.